There are moments in life that shatter everything you thought you knew, moments that arrive not with a violent crash, but with a quiet, insidious revelation, leaving you breathless and utterly disoriented. For Shi Heng Yi, that profound, gut-wrenching moment arrived with the innocuous ping of a voice message notification. It was meant for someone else, a private exchange. Yet, through a cruel twist of fate, it landed directly in her hands, its contents laying bare a truth so venomous, so utterly devastating, that it demanded an equally ruthless response. What she was about to hear would force her to reevaluate every sacrifice, every act of love, and every foundational belief she held about her own family. Her own daughter, Grace, had just spoken Shi Heng Yi's unwitting death warrant, not with a pen, but with words. And as those words echoed in the quiet of her home, Shi Heng Yi realized her life, as she knew it, was over, and a new, frightening chapter was about to begin, one she was entirely unprepared for, yet utterly compelled to write. The world was about to discover that a lifetime of quiet devotion had forged a resilience no one, especially her daughter, had ever truly anticipated. The accidental revelation. My name is Shi Heng Yi, and I was 66 years old when my world imploded. That Tuesday afternoon started like any other, or at least like any other of the increasingly difficult days I'd been experiencing since Grace and Richard, my daughter and son-in-law, had moved into my home temporarily. They had left early that morning murmuring about work matters, but I sensed a shift in the air, a tension beneath their forced smiles and hushed conversations. The house, which for decades had been my sanctuary, now felt like a cage, every corner holding a phantom whisper, every silence heavy with unspoken secrets. I walked through the familiar rooms, a growing sense of dread tightening in my chest. My routines, my small comforts, even the quiet rhythm of my existence had been disrupted, altered to fit their demanding presence and, as I would soon discover, their clandestine plans. Around 3 o'clock, as I brewed a cup of chamomile tea, hoping to calm the churning anxiety within me, my phone chimed. A voice message from Grace. My first thought, a fleeting flicker of hope, was that she was finally letting me know when they'd be home, or perhaps asking me to prepare one of Richard's favorite desserts for dinner. How achingly naive I was to think my daughter still valued my presence or cared to share her day with me. With a gentle sigh, I pressed play, oblivious that the next 3 minutes would not just unravel my life, but tear it to shreds. Ricardo, I can't take having my mother in this house anymore. Grace's voice, cold and laced with an exasperation I had never witnessed, directed at me in person, sliced through the quiet. My breath hitched. My heart, a loyal, weary organ, seemed to seize in my chest. Those words, delivered with such naked contempt, were like sharp, jagged daggers piercing through my very soul. This wasn't the sweet daughter who had once wrapped her arms around me, whispering, "I love you, Mom," as she left for school or a date. This was a stranger, cruel and calculating. She's a total nuisance. Richard, she gets into everything we do, always asking questions, always there. And on top of that, we're already spending so much money on her. The words kept coming, each one a fresh wound. I've been looking into some cheap places. I found one on the outskirts that only costs $800 a month. With what we save, we can finally remodel the kitchen we want so badly and even get new furniture for the living room. Every syllable resonated with the horrifying clarity of a physical blow. My own daughter, the child for whom I had willingly sacrificed everything, was talking about me as if I were a piece of old, worn-out furniture fit only to be discarded. The sum, $800, that the cheap place would cost was precisely the amount I had been faithfully giving them every month for their so-called personal expenses, money scraped from my modest pension and dwindling savings. The floor might as well have opened up beneath my feet, swallowing me whole. This was Grace, the very daughter for whom I had toiled day and night, cleaning strangers' homes until my hands ached and my back screamed in protest. This was the same girl for whom I had sold every piece of jewelry I owned, even my treasured wedding ring, to fund her college education. This was the woman who had wept inconsolably in my arms when Richard first left her at the altar, and for whom I had spent my last precious savings to convince him to return, patching up her broken heart with fragments of my own. But the audio continued, and what came next was a descent into an even deeper, more terrifying abyss of betrayal. Also, I've already checked all the house papers. It's in her name, but Carol already explained how we can transfer it to our name without her realizing. It's going to be about $500 in bribes and fees, but it's worth it. My cousin already has experience with these kinds of arrangements. My hands began to tremble so violently that the phone nearly slipped from my grasp. My own flesh and blood, my daughter, was not only planning to cast me aside, but was also meticulously plotting to steal my home. This house, the only thing of true value I possessed in this world, the sanctuary I had built brick by painstaking brick with the sweat of my brow, working 12-hour days for 30 long years, was to be taken from me. Then came the final, most sickening blow. The audio continued, and I heard Grace's casual, almost joyful laugh mingling with Richard's approving murmurs. In a month, Mom will be in the home and will own everything. We can finally live in peace without that bitter old woman controlling us. The casual cruelty of her laughter, the sheer lack of remorse, twisted a knot of pain so profound in my chest that I thought I might suffocate. If you have ever experienced the most searing, soul-deep betrayal from someone you loved unconditionally, then you might comprehend the agonizing icy shock that coursed through me in that devastating moment. But what Grace, my cunning, calculating daughter, didn't understand, couldn't possibly fathom, was that her mother wasn't as naive or as easily dismissed as she believed. After 66 years navigating this complicated world, I had learned a crucial, often harsh, lesson. Sometimes the only way to defend yourself, to truly survive, is to wield the same sharp cunning that others have dared to use against you. That night, sleep was an impossible dream. I lay awake, the words replaying endlessly in my mind, fueling a quiet, burning resolve. As dawn painted the sky with soft hues, I rose, a fierce determination I hadn't felt in years coursing through my veins. I donned my most elegant crimson suit, a symbol of strength I reserved for pivotal moments, gathered all my essential documents, and walked out of that house with a serene smile on my lips and a plan taking shape in my mind. A plan she would never, ever see coming. A lifetime of sacrifice, to truly grasp the seismic impact of that voice message, to understand why its words cut so deeply, I must first share the journey that shaped me into the woman I am today, and how my relationship with Grace became the unwavering core of my existence. I was born into a family where love wasn't measured by extravagant gestures or material wealth, but by the quiet, tireless sacrifices one made for others. My mother, may she rest in peace, was a seamstress, her fingers flying across fabric from 5 in the morning until 10 at night, her sole purpose to provide for me and my 3 siblings. We never had much money, but our home was always rich with an abundance of love, mutual respect, and deeply ingrained values. Shi Heng Yi, my mother would often say, her voice soft yet firm as she taught me the intricate stitches of her trade. In this life, the only thing that truly matters is family. And for family, you give everything you have, down to the last drop of your blood. These words, simple yet profound, became the bedrock of my philosophy. When I found myself pregnant with Grace at the tender age of 18, her father vanished as if by magic. One night he was there, weaving dreams of marriage and a shared future. The next morning he was gone, a phantom. His parents, rigid and unforgiving, slammed their door in my face when I desperately sought him out, coldly declaring their son wouldn't ruin his future for some random girl. It was in that moment of despair that my mother, my steadfast anchor, revealed the true depth of her strength and resilience. That child, she declared, pulling me into a fierce, comforting hug, wiping away my tears, is going to have everything we couldn't. We'll raise her together and she will grow into a good, strong woman. True to her word, my mother sold her only 2 gold bracelets, the sole pieces of jewelry she possessed, to ensure I had everything I needed for the baby. When Grace finally arrived, a tiny, perfect bundle, it felt as if an angel had descended into our humble lives. She was the most beautiful baby I had ever laid eyes on, with wide, curious eyes and a smile that could illuminate the darkest corners of any room. My mother and I took turns caring for her, a seamless dance of devotion, while I, at just 19, began cleaning houses. I earned a paltry $20 a day, barely enough to cover the essentials, but every single cent was dedicated to Grace, to building her a future brighter than my own. I vividly recall the first day I took Grace to kindergarten. We walked hand in hand because bus fare was an unthinkable luxury, yet her uniform was immaculately ironed, her tiny shoes polished to a gleam. The other mothers, elegant and composed, arrived in gleaming cars, their expensive clothes rustling, and I, in my patched-up dress, my hands rough and calloused from endless scrubbing, felt acutely small, almost invisible. But when Grace, with the innocent trust of a child, leaned in and kissed my cheek, whispering, "Thank you, Mom. You're the best in the world," I knew with every fiber of my being that every sacrifice, every ache, every moment of self-denial was immeasurably worth it. The years blurred into a relentless rhythm, my routine a testament to tireless dedication. I would wake at 4 in the morning, prepare Grace's breakfast, take her to school, then work cleaning 3 different houses until 6 in the evening. After picking her up, I'd help her with her homework, patiently explaining concepts until her brow smoothed in understanding, and finally tuck her into bed with a cherished story. Weekends, my supposed days of rest, were spent doing laundry for others, a means to earn extra money, all meticulously saved and spent so that Grace could have a life far richer, far easier than mine. My mother passed away when Grace was 8, leaving a gaping void in our lives. But before she left, she extracted a promise from me, words that became a guiding star in my darkest hours. "Shi Heng Yi," she whispered, her voice frail but resolute. "That child is your greatest treasure. Give her an education. Shower her with love, and she will take care of you when you're old. Our family's blood is good. She won't fail you." Those words, a sacred trust, became the unyielding bedrock of my strength, propelling me forward even when the weight of the days became so crushing that the urge to simply give up was almost unbearable. When Grace turned 15, I worked extra shifts for 6 relentless months, driven by the singular goal of giving her the quinceañera party she deserved, a beautiful coming-of-age celebration. I spent a staggering $3,500 on that event, money I had painstakingly saved to finally repair our leaky roof, a persistent symbol of our struggles. But seeing the pure joy on her face that night, watching her spin and sparkle in her golden dress as she danced under the soft lights, was utterly priceless, a memory etched in my heart forever. "Mom," she told me that night, hugging me tightly, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how you give me so much when you have almost nothing. When I grow up, I'm going to give all this back to you, multiplied by 1,000. Her promise, sincere and heartfelt in that moment, solidified my belief that my sacrifices were building a future not just for her, but for us, a future where love and gratitude would be our enduring legacy. Throughout her high school years, Grace was an exemplary student, shining brightly. She consistently earned the best grades, graced the stage in school plays, and every teacher spoke of her brilliant future with enthusiastic certainty. But maintaining such a high standard of education was anything but cheap. Books, uniforms, field trips, extracurricular activities. The costs accumulated rapidly, demanding money I simply didn't possess. To keep up, I began cleaning a 4th house on Sundays, my only previous day of rest, sacrificing my sole opportunity for reprieve just to ensure she had every opportunity. When it was time for college, the annual tuition alone was a daunting $15,000. My cleaning jobs, even with the added Sunday shift, brought in a mere $400 a month. The math was brutally clear. It was impossible. Yet a mother, driven by an unwavering love, does the impossible for her children. I took out a loan, using our beloved house, my most precious asset, as collateral. I sold the last remnants of my past, the only engagement ring her father had given me before his disappearance, and even my mother's cherished sewing machine, a relic of our family's industrious spirit. My daughter, I told Grace, my voice filled with a mixture of pride and quiet determination, on the day I took her to enroll. I couldn't go to college, but you are going to be a professional. You'll earn your degree. You'll work in an office with air conditioning, and you'll never have to clean other people's houses like your mother. That day, as I watched my daughter sign the enrollment papers for her business administration degree, tears of pure, unadulterated happiness streamed down my face. For all 4 demanding years of her college education, I continued to work with relentless intensity, pushing my body and spirit to their limits to cover all her expenses. Grace needed money for textbooks, for ambitious projects, for outings with her friends, for appropriate attire for important presentations. I gave her everything she asked for, even if it meant I had to subsist on plain beans and tortillas for an entire week to save every precious penny. Her graduation day was, without a doubt, the proudest moment of my entire life. Watching my daughter stride confidently onto the stage in her cap and gown, hearing her name called out, and witnessing the thunderous ovation from the crowd felt like the ultimate vindication, as if every single sacrifice I had ever made had finally, beautifully paid off. After the ceremony, she hugged me, her face wet with tears of joy, and whispered, "Mom, this degree is as much yours as it is mine. I would never have made it here without you. I promise you that now that I'm a professional, you will never have to suffer again." Her words, brimming with sincerity, solidified the hope I carried deep within my heart, the hope that my devotion had cultivated a grateful, loving daughter. The subtle seeds of doubt. A year after her graduation, Grace met Richard at her new job. Initially, I was overjoyed, witnessing her radiating happiness, so deeply in love. Richard seemed like a genuinely good man. He held a stable position as a factory supervisor, and crucially, he treated my daughter with kindness and respect. When he officially asked for her hand in marriage, tears of profound emotion welled in my eyes. I believed, with unwavering conviction, that Grace was finally on the cusp of having the stable, loving family I could never quite provide for her. But even that joyous occasion came with its own heavy price. Organizing the wedding, a grand affair Grace envisioned, like the ones in magazines, became yet another immense financial sacrifice. The venue alone cost $8,000. Her dream dress was $2,000, the music $800, and the flowers a delicate $600. In total, I poured $10,000 into that single day, money I secured by taking out yet another loan and selling the very last remnants of my remaining jewelry, my final tangible connections to a past I was willing to relinquish for her future. The initial years of their marriage were, in many ways, idyllic. Grace and Richard would visit me faithfully every Sunday, their presence filling my home with warmth and laughter. We'd share dinner, and Grace, true to her word, always helped with my household expenses. "Mom," she would say, pressing money into my hand for groceries, "now that I'm working, I want to take care of you the way you took care of me." I finally felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction that all my arduous sacrifices had indeed borne fruit, that I had raised a truly grateful daughter who cherished me deeply. But then, 3 years ago, a shadow began to fall. Richard lost his job, plunging them into unexpected financial turmoil. Gradually, subtly, they began to ask me for money, and as always, my maternal heart found it impossible to say no. First, it was $1,000 for monthly expenses, a temporary measure, they assured me. Then, $12,500 for a down payment on a new car, an essential, they insisted. Soon after, another $3,000 to pay off mounting credit card debts. Everything, every nuanced detail of our relationship began to shift after I lent them that last $3,000. At first, these changes were small, easily justifiable in my mind. I attributed them to the overwhelming stress of their financial problems, clinging to the belief that their love for me was immutable. But now, after hearing that horrifying voice message, I understood with chilling clarity it wasn't stress. It was the calculated, insidious beginning of a deliberate plan to slowly, systematically push me out of their lives. The first palpable sign arrived when their Sunday visits, once sacrosanct, ceased. "Mom, we're so busy with Richard's new job," Grace would explain over the phone, her voice tinged with what I now recognize as feigned regret. "You know how it is. We need to show we're responsible." I understood, or at least I desperately wanted to. It was natural, I reasoned, for a young couple to focus on building their future, on getting ahead. But then came the escalating excuses for not answering my calls. I'd call in the mornings, and Grace would rush me off the phone. "Mom, I'm in an important meeting. I'll call you later." In the afternoons, "Oh, Mom, I'm at the grocery store doing our weekly shopping." At night, "Mom, it's too late. We're having dinner. We'll talk tomorrow." That elusive tomorrow rarely materialized, and when we finally did connect, the conversation was clipped, barely lasting 5 minutes, a hurried exchange that left me feeling more isolated than before. Then, the hurtful comments started, disguised, cunningly, as concern. "Mom, Richard says he's noticed you've been very forgetful lately," Grace said one day during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "Are you sure you can live alone in that big house? At your age, anything could happen." I laughed nervously, attempting to dismiss her words, convinced they were simply exaggerating. But the insidious seed of doubt had been planted, taking root in the fertile ground of my own anxieties about aging. One afternoon, armed with Richard's favorite pineapple dessert, I decided to visit them unannounced. When I knocked on their door, I heard laughter and hushed voices inside, but it took an agonizing 5 minutes before they finally opened it. "Oh, Mom, what a surprise," Grace said, her smile stretched and artificial, failing to reach the depths of her eyes. "We were just organizing some work papers." Inside, her cousin Carol, the same Carol who worked at the county clerk's office, sat surrounded by a chaotic scattering of documents on the kitchen table. Upon seeing me, Carol quickly gathered the papers, stuffing them into a folder with a furtive glance. "Hello, Aunt Heng, she greeted me, her smile as fake as Grace's. I was just helping Grace with some of Richard's health insurance paperwork. But I, with a sharp eye and years of observing subtle human nuances, managed to catch a glimpse of my own name emblazoned on one of those hidden documents. "Why do you need papers with my name on them?" I asked, a genuine thread of curiosity intertwining with a nascent flicker of unease. Grace and Carol exchanged a swift, knowing look that I couldn't decipher at the time, but which now, in hindsight, spoke volumes. "It's just to update the beneficiaries on the insurance, Mom," Grace explained, her voice overly sweet. "You know, in case something happens to us, you're our only family." That explanation, plausible enough, calmed my fears for the moment. But later, I started to notice that any mention of the subject by me was met with a swift, almost frantic change of conversation. "Mom, why don't you tell me about the garden?" she'd say. Or, "Oh, Mom, did you see the new show that's on Channel 5? Then came the deliberate forgetfulness, a pattern that chipped away at my trust. They would invite me to lunch, only for me to arrive at the restaurant to find them conspicuously absent. "Oh, Mom, we forgot to tell you we had to cancel." They'd apologize later, their voices dripping with feigned remorse. Richard had a work emergency. This infuriating scenario unfolded 3 times in 2 months. The 4th time, I sat alone in that bustling restaurant for an agonizing hour, feeling utterly foolish, watching other families enjoy their meals, while a cold, lonely ache settled in my heart. They also started excluding me from significant family events. I discovered, purely by chance, through a casual conversation with my lifelong neighbor, Miss Rose, that they had hosted a barbecue to celebrate Richard's birthday. "How strange you weren't there, Heng, Miss Rose had remarked, her brow furrowed. "I saw them buying meat for like 20 people at the supermarket." When I cautiously confronted Grace, she brushed it off with a dismissive wave. "Oh, Mom, it was a very informal thing. We didn't want to bother you." But the deepest cut, the straw that finally broke the camel's back, was their decision to move into my house temporarily. "Mom, Grace announced, her voice brimming with what I mistook for genuine excitement. They're going to paint our apartment and we need to stay with you for about a month. Besides, this way we can spend more time together. Don't you think it's perfect? I, yearning for the closeness we had lost, was genuinely thrilled to have them near again, hoping to rekindle the warmth and intimacy that had once defined our relationship. However, from the very first day they arrived, a disturbing shift occurred within the familiar walls of my home. My sanctuary transformed into an uncomfortable battleground. Richard, emboldened by his presence, began to complain incessantly about everything. My television was too old, the internet too slow, the shower lacked enough water pressure. Aunt, he'd declare with a condescending air, this house needs a lot of repairs. At your age, maintaining such a big property must be very difficult. Grace, meanwhile, began reorganizing my belongings without a single word of consultation. Mom, these plates are too old. I'm going to replace them with new ones, she'd announce, discarding my cherished china as if it were trash. And these clothes you have in the closet are so out of style. We should just donate them. Slowly, insidiously, my house ceased to feel like my own. It was as if I, the rightful owner, had been relegated to the status of a mere guest, an unwelcome intruder in my own home. Then came the hushed conversations, furtive whispers that would abruptly cease the moment I entered a room. I'd catch them talking animatedly in the kitchen, only for them to abruptly pivot to trivialities, the weather, the evening news, as soon as they saw me. What were you talking about? I'd ask, a growing suspicion stirring within me. Nothing important, Mom, Grace would reply, her smile too quick, too bright. Just about the house expenses. One night I overheard Richard talking on the phone from the patio, his voice low and secretive. Yeah, we're already living here. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. Carol says she can have all the papers ready in 2 more weeks. When I stepped outside to inquire who he was speaking with, he quickly concocted a story about his boss and a work project. They also began subtly controlling my finances. Mom, let me help you with the electric and water bills, Grace would say, her tone saccharine. You're too old to be worrying about these things. At first, I interpreted this as a kind, solicitous gesture. But then I discovered she was meticulously scrutinizing all my bank statements. Mom, why do you need so much cash? She'd inquire, her tone accusatory, whenever she saw I had withdrawn a modest $200 for my personal expenses. The most excruciating pain, however, came from overhearing their callous remarks about me when they believed I was out of earshot. One afternoon, while I was tending to the plants in my beloved garden, I heard Richard tell someone on the phone, "My mother-in-law is getting harder to handle. She's becoming very stubborn with age." Grace's tinkling laugh followed, a sound that twisted my gut. "It's true," she added. "Lately she forgets things and gets very difficult when we try to help her." But what truly ripped open my eyes, what illuminated the sinister trajectory of their actions, was when they began making comments about my mental health in front of other people. My dear friend of many years, Miss Leticia, came to visit, and Grace, with an air of profound concern, declared, "Oh, Leticia, my mom has been so confused lately. Yesterday she wanted to go for a walk at 10 at night because she thought it was morning." This was a complete outright lie. I had never, not once, done such a thing. Yet I watched as Letitia's eyes filled with pity and concern, her gaze shifting to me with a newfound wariness. "Oh, Heng Yi," she said, her voice laced with sympathy. "It's a good thing you have Grace to take care of you." In that moment, a deep, seething anger flared within me, quickly followed by an immense, crushing sadness. As the horrifying realization dawned, my own daughter was meticulously constructing a false narrative about my mental state, deliberately painting me as incompetent and vulnerable. Strange, unsettling visitors began to arrive at my house. Doctors, supposedly there to check my blood pressure, though I had no prior appointment. Social workers insisting they needed to evaluate my living conditions. Even a man who introduced himself as a geriatric care specialist. They all appeared at Grace's scheduling, never once asking if I desired these intrusions. During one of these invasive evaluations, I overheard the doctor talking with Grace in the living room. "Ma'am, Your mother seems to be physically fine, but I'm going to note in the report that she shows signs of mild age-related confusion. I stood in the kitchen listening, completely lucid and fully aware, while this man meticulously documented fabricated lies about my mental condition. The tension in my own house became almost unbearable. Each passing day brought a fresh wave of pressure, a new layer of control over my life, more hurtful comments cloaked in the guise of loving concern. "Mom, you shouldn't drive anymore," Richard informed me one day, his tone authoritative. "At your age, it's too dangerous." "Mom, it's better if you don't go shopping alone anymore," Grace chimed in, her voice falsely gentle. "We can do it for you." Slowly, methodically, they were stripping away my independence, my autonomy, my very dignity. And the cruelest part was that they did it all with smiles on their faces, continually assuring me it was for my own good, that they loved me so much and only wanted to take care of me. The unveiling of the scheme, the moment that irrevocably altered the course of my life, that Tuesday afternoon when my entire world collapsed, came through a simple technological error, a misplaced voice message that revealed the cruelest, most heinous truth I had experienced in all my 66 years. That day had been particularly fraught. Grace and Richard had departed early, claiming pressing work matters, but I knew deep in my bones that something was profoundly amiss. I had observed their hushed, conspiratorial whispers all morning, and when I had dared to inquire, they had responded with those sickeningly fake smiles I had by then learned to recognize as a precursor to deceit. "It's nothing, Mom," Grace had chirped, her voice overly bright. "Just boring stuff about Richard's job." I was left alone in the house, a suffocating pressure building in my chest, a palpable weight that had intensified with each passing week. The house that had once been my solace, my cherished haven, now felt undeniably like a prison. Everything had shifted, irrevocably changed, since their temporary stay had begun. My cherished routines, my private spaces,